The theme of this year's conference is breakthrough. A single idea can start a groundswell, be a flashpoint for a movement, and it can rewrite our future. If you communicate in a way that resonates, change will happen. Time and again throughout history, we've seen the incredible impact we can have when we communicate powerfully. Today I'm going to be sharing with you what you can do to have more breakthroughs and more impact in your career and personal life by becoming a more engaging, persuasive, and powerful communicator. All of these speakers, they have one thing in common. Some are in politics, some are in business, some are men, some are women. But what they all have in common is they were able to achieve the communication sweet spot. Research shows there are two qualities that account for over 90% of the impressions that others form of us. So when you're speaking on a stage, when you're in a business meeting, leading a team, we're constantly being assessed on these two qualities. How many of you saw Oprah's Golden Globe speech this year? Good amount of you. She spoke for just 9 minutes, and yet Twitter and Facebook were blowing up with Oprah for president. She hit this sweet spot, and it had a huge impact. The same goes for Bill Clinton throughout his career. There's a great quote by a Republican. He said, "I hated him before I met him, I hated him after I met him, but when I was with him, I sure did love him." And again, it was because he hit this sweet spot. He had high levels of these two qualities. So what are they? They are warmth and competence. So when we're assessing someone, we first look to, do I like and trust this person? Do they seem caring? Do they seem passionate? This isn't about being nice and sweet. It's just showing that you care, showing that you're willing to give your all to a cause. It's meaningful to you and really connecting with your audience. This is something that Bill Clinton is brilliant at, and we'll take a look at a clip of him in a moment. And then there's competence. This is strength. This is seeming knowledgeable and competent, showing that you know what you're talking about. So I'm going to play a clip in a moment. This is a debate between George Bush and Bill Clinton. And I want you to look at them in a few different ways. So first, we communicate warmth and competence in 3 different ways. Visually through our body language, vocally through our voice, and then verbally through the actual content that we say. And so if you're on this side of the room, as you watch the debate, I want you to notice, what do the speakers do to show warmth physically with their body? Or what do they do to undermine warmth? If you're in this part of the room, I want you to look at their voice. What are they doing vocally to show warmth and competence, and what might they be doing to undermine it? And if you're on this part of the room, I want you to look at, what are they doing verbally? What are they doing to show warmth or competence or undermine it with the actual content of what they say?
We have a question right here.
Yes, how has the national debt personally affected each of your lives? And if it hasn't, how can you honestly find a cure for the economic problems of the common people if you have no experience in what's ailing them?
Well, I think the national debt affects everybody. Obviously, it has a lot to do with interest rates. It has.
She's saying you personally.
On a personal basis, how has it affected you?
Has it affected you personally?
Well, I'm sure it has. I love my grandchildren. I want to think
How?
that think that they're going to be able to afford an education. I think that that's an important part of being a parent. Maybe I won't get it wrong. Are you suggesting that if somebody has means, that the national debt doesn't affect them?
What I'm saying
I'm not sure I get it. Help me with the question, and I'll try to answer it.
I've had friends that have been laid off from jobs.
Yeah.
I know people who cannot afford to pay the mortgage on their homes, their car payment. I have personal problems with the national debt, but how has it affected you? And if you have no experience in it, how can you help us if you don't know what we're feeling?
I think she means more the recession, the economic problems today the country faces, rather than the deficit.
You ought to be in the White House for a day and hear what I hear and see what I see and read the mail I read and touch the people that I touch from time to time. I was in the Lomax AME church. It's a black church just outside of Washington, D.C. And I read in the bulletin about teenage pregnancies, about the difficulty that families are having to make ends meet. I talk to parents. I mean, you got to care. Everybody cares if people aren't doing well. But I don't think it's fair to say, you haven't had cancer, therefore you don't know what it's like. I don't think it's fair to say, whatever it is, that if you haven't been hit by it personally, but everybody's affected by the debt. Because of the tremendous interest that goes into paying on that debt, everything's more expensive. Everything comes out of your pocket and my pocket. So it's that. But I think in terms of the recession, of course you feel it when you're president of the United States. And that's why I'm trying to do something about it by stimulating the export, investing more, better education systems. Thank you. I'm glad to clarify.
Tell me how it's affected you again. You know people who've lost their jobs and lost their homes? Well, I've been governor of a small state for 12 years. I'll tell you how it's affected me. Every year, Congress and the president sign laws that make us do more things, and gives us less money to do it with. I see people in my state, middle-class people, their taxes have gone up in Washington and their services have gone down, while the wealthy have gotten tax cuts. I have seen what's happened in this last 4 years when, in my state, when people lose their jobs, there's a good chance I'll know them by their names. When a factory closes, I know the people who ran it. When the businesses go bankrupt, I know them. And I've been out here for 13 months, meeting in meetings just like this ever since October, with people like you all over America. People that have lost their jobs, lost their livelihood, lost their health insurance. What I want you to understand is the national debt is not the only cause of that. It is because America has not invested in its people. It is because we have not grown. It is because we've had 12 years of trickle-down economics. We've gone from 1st to 12th in the world in wages. We've had 4 years where we produced no private sector jobs. Most people are working harder for less money than they were making 10 years ago. It is because we are in the grip of a failed economic theory. And this decision you're about to make better be about what kind of economic theory you want. Not just people saying, I'm going to go fix it, but what are we going to do? What I think we have to do is invest in American jobs, American education, control American health care costs, and bring the American people together again.
So big difference. Let's start with this side of the room. What did you notice? What stood out for you in terms of body language between the two?
He moved closer.
Yeah. So in terms of showing warmth, he actually moved in and toward the person who asked the question. And then I saw this. Bush, in contrast, this is very disconnecting. It's not showing a lot of warmth and creates defensiveness in the audience. What else stood out? He looked at his watch. It seems like he doesn't care. What else?
Bush just stood up and clearly wasn't paying attention to the question.
He kind of looked, yeah, he looked kind of distracted. He ends up turning at one point. Exactly, versus again, Clinton walks straight toward her. He has strong eye contact. So in the class that I teach at the business school, after the students give a presentation, we have them watch their videos 3 different ways. The first way, we have them turn off the sound and just look at their body language, which is really informative. Horrible to watch, but very informative. See you all cringing in the audience. And then they don't look at the screen and they just listen to their voice, and then both together. Because each is so informative, and in this video, we could turn off the sound and we'd still get the same impression of Bush and Clinton. We'd see this, we'd see him turning, versus we'd see Clinton walking toward. He does a lot of warmer gestures. He puts his hand on his chest. He extends outward. So we're constantly signaling, whether we realize it or not, so much information through our body language. We're signaling to our audience, do I like this person? Do I trust them? Do I want to work with them? Should I buy into their ideas? So we do that physically with our body language, and then we also do it vocally with our voice. So how about this group? What did you notice vocally?
The tone of voice.
The tone, say more. What stood out for you?
Bush was just kind of instinctively, he seemed really angry.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and condescending, and Clinton was more welcome, more receptive to what she was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Just the tone wasn't immediately very inviting, trying to understand where she's coming from, whereas, Bush was quick to say,
Yeah.
by even his tone of voice, that you're wrong, or why would you?
And we hear that in his voice. Regardless of content, he sounds condescending. He sounds kind of annoyed and not really connecting, in contrast to Clinton, who's very warm. You know people who have lost their jobs and lost their homes. And research shows, too, we're most powerful when we start with warmth and then we move to competence. So if you notice, he first connected, his voice was warm, and then it got a lot stronger toward the end, and his body language became a lot stronger toward the end, as did his content. And so a great way to think about this is you want to connect and then lead. You want to meet the audience where they are, really connect with them, get them on your side emotionally with your body language, voice, and content, and then move to these are the facts and the figures and your strength and competence. And then lastly, this group. What did you notice in terms of content?
That's an immediately repeated back to her to confirm. Like, so you said you experienced these things and these things. I mean, it feels like he's hearing her.
Yes, a question which is really connecting. I hear you. He cares where she's coming from. Why are you asking this question? Let me try to understand. And Bush also tried to understand, but he did it in a different way. I don't understand, help me understand, versus, right? He's saying the words, but we're not really believing it. And again, nonverbals are so important versus really connecting with her first. Yeah, what else stood out for you? Yeah. Yeah, the repetition is powerful. He knows what he's talking about. He's repeating the same thing over and over again, in contrast to Bush. Yeah, what else stood out? Yeah. And what's brilliant about that is he accomplished warmth and competence at the same time. He established a lot of credibility. I've been on the ground. I've been talking to people just like you, but I also know people by name. So I'm on the ground. I understand. And by the way, here are the facts and figures. And then he went on to even more competence, which was really powerful.
Also use it as
Yeah.
an opportunity to compare what's been not working.
Exactly. So here's where we are now. Again, he's meeting the audience where they are, what's going on, and then he moves them to where he wants them to go. So a best practice is, here's the state, here's the problem, here's what's going on, I understand where you're coming from, and then here's what I think we should do about it. You really have to meet someone where they are and then move them where you want them to go. And as you mentioned earlier, some of the language, use the word means, which could be a bit disconnecting, so thinking about your audience's language. I don't think it's fair. You ought to be in the White House. So again, language matters. It either connects and brings you closer, or it can distance you from your audience. So we'll be going more into detail what exactly you should be doing with your voice and body language and content. But first, an important point I'd like to make is that our nonverbals often have a greater impact than the actual words that we say. We saw this a bit with Bush, kind of saying, I care and I don't understand, but we're not really believing that he cares. He might, but he's not showing that through his body language. Similarly, if I were to say, yeah, I'm having a really great time, or yeah, I'm having a really great time, I'm saying the exact same content, but you're making different meaning of it. And so if you're a speaker and you're saying, this is a huge breakthrough, or this is a huge breakthrough, I'm really excited to announce it to you, the audience won't believe that. You're undermining your content. Or if in a meeting you have a really important idea and you want to give weight to it, but you're talking really fast and you have uptalk and there's ums, or you're talking really quietly, even regardless of the content, you're not allowing it to be as powerful as it could be. So nonverbals matter, and we'll take a look at a quick video clip in a second. But first, I also want to add, we often have a guest speaker come into our class from a company called Quantified Communications. He takes big data and he applies it to public speaking. So he's looked at all the best speeches in history, Fortune 500 leaders, and he looks at what creates influence. This is the chart that he came up with. So passion is the #1 factor. Speakers who come across as the most passionate tend to be the most influential. And this goes to the warmth piece. You're showing you care. You're showing you'll give your all for a cause. You'll put the time in. It's meaningful to you. Second was knowledgeable. Interesting, this wasn't actually having knowledge, it was just sounding knowledgeable, which we'll see in a second with the clip. But our voice is a full quarter of our impact. And that's something we don't always give enough time to. When I work with speakers, they'll have their talk, they'll deliver it, but then it's 10 times more powerful when we work on their vocal variety, on their pace, on their pauses. They're giving more weight and more emotion to it, and that's what moves the audience. Presence is 15%, and then content was just 11%. So this doesn't mean content is not important. You can use your content to show passion. You can tell a personal story or a customer story. You can use content to show you're knowledgeable, the facts and figures, as Clinton did. But it's that your message alone isn't enough. You really have to bring it to life in the right way by the way you frame it and through your delivery. So now we'll look at a quick clip on the power of nonverbals.
Hear that? That's nothing. which is what I, as a speaker at today's conference, have for you all. I have nothing. Nada. Zip. Zilch. Zippo. Nothing smart, nothing inspirational, nothing even remotely researched at all. I have absolutely nothing to say whatsoever. And yet, through my manner of speaking, I will make it seem like I do. Like what I am saying is brilliant. And maybe, just maybe, you will feel like you've learned something. Now, I'm going to get started with the opening. I'm going to make a lot of hand gestures. I'm going to do this with my right hand. I'm going to do this with my left. I'm going to adjust my glasses. And then I'm going to ask you all a question. By show of hands, how many of you all have been asked a question before? Okay, great. I'm seeing some hands. And again, I have nothing here. Now, I'm going to react to that and act like I'm telling you a personal anecdote. Something to break the tension. Something to endear myself a little bit. Something kind of embarrassing. And you guys are going to make an awe sound. It's true. It really happened. And now I'm going to bring it to a broader point. I'm going to reel you back in. I'm going to make it intellectual. I'm going to bring it to this man right here. Now, what this man did was important, I'm sure. But I, for one, have no idea who he is. I simply Google image the word scientist. And now, you see, I'd like it to seem like I'm making points, building an argument, inspiring you to change your life, when in reality, this is just me buying time.
What did he do well? A lot of vocal variety, and he keeps changing it. And so one thing that's really important to you in your presentations and speaking is to have your emotional tone match your content. And so I'm going to tell a personal story. I'm going to endear myself a little bit, which is what Clinton did. He started with warmth. Now I'm going to take it back to the numbers. He had a more authoritative tone. I'm going to bring it back to this man right here. And he also has a lot of excitement. I will make it seem like I am. So he makes it sound like what he's talking about is very exciting, regardless of content. So if you're talking about a customer who had a lot of frustration or something that's really meaningful to you or a huge breakthrough, it's important that you align your content with your voice, and that will be even more powerful. What else stood out?
But also it's shocking that someone is on stage and he has nothing to say.
Yes.
So you're almost expecting that there has to be something.
He makes it sound like there is. Yes. And we're just attuned to voice, to body language, and we're constantly making meaning from it. And so again, this doesn't mean that content isn't important. It's just you really want to do your content justice. You want to give it the most power you can give it. And you don't want to do anything to undermine it on the flip side of that. So if I were to give this same presentation and I was standing back here and I was talking really fast and I had closed body language, it could be the exact same content, but you'll see me differently, you'll see the content differently based on all of these things combined. And so just know that nonverbals do matter and they will give you greater impact, and we'll see future examples of that. So how I like to think about it is your delivery is what gets you off the ground. It's what engages the audience in the moment. You don't want anyone tuning out. You don't want anyone thinking what they need to do tomorrow or not buying into your idea, not having trust in it. You really want them to sit up, pay attention. This person has something important to say, and I want to be on their side. I want to buy into it. I trust them, and they also seem confident and strong. And then your content tells them where you want them to go. This is how you want them to think, what you want them to do. You're allowing them to back up the credibility that you've earned through your nonverbals. So first, we'll talk about visually. How can you hit that sweet spot with your body language? So I'm going to have you all stand up. So it's very common as speakers. We tend to lean on one leg. This feels very comfortable, but it doesn't look as confident. So I want you to put your feet parallel, equal weight on both feet. And this is a very confident stance. So this gives you a solid base, and you're signaling to your audience, again, strength, confidence. Just watching out, kind of duck feet is something that's common. Crossing, it's just feet parallel, about hip width apart, strong base. Then a question I get asked a lot is, what do I do with my hands? It can be very awkward, right? So two places you can have them when you're not gesturing. So one is down by your side. Does this feel very awkward? Yes. So if you're on this side of the room to here, I want you to turn this way. And if you're on this side of the room to about halfway, turn to the other side of the room. Look at each other. But it feels awkward, but looks confident, right? Everyone looks very confident, looking good. Okay, you can come back. Did you see that? So this is your base. So here, or if this is very uncomfortable, you kind of pretend you're giving a hug and then just kind of loose by your torso, mid-torso. This is fine as well. You have the clicker, for example, here. You just don't want to do anything distracting. So I've seen everything. People milk their fingers. They do wounded paw, spider. It's just kind of loosely clasped. You want to be tight here, but just kind of drop down, loose. Not here. We call this the fig leaf. This is also common. There's so many of these. So yeah, just kind of loosely clasp here or down by your side, either one. So to highlight this, the big and balanced. And so you also, so balanced we talked about, and then you also want to be big. You want to take up space, right? If I'm uncomfortable, if I'm anxious and shy, we close up, and this signals something to the audience. And so you want to take up space. So as you're gesturing, don't hit your neighbor, but just practice becoming more expansive. So we started here in January. We were here by December. This is the progress that we've made. Again, yeah, a lot of no injuries here. Because what happens when we gesture in close is we look like a T-Rex. You don't want to look like a T-Rex. And so it's breaking the shoulder line. It's fully extending your arm. There's a big gap we need to fill. Again, we started here, and then we moved to here. This just makes you look stronger, more confident. You can look scripted sometimes when you have bigger gestures. So what you want to avoid is the I don't know gesture. So a lot of people gesture like this. This looks like I don't know. So if you turn off the volume, you keep saying, I don't know, I don't know. So one way to get out of that is you turn your palm over, and this is a more confident position. Oh, yeah, so ooh. So you can say on the one hand, but on the other hand. We started here in January, and then we were here by December. So this just doesn't look scripted. It looks more powerful. So you can do that. A very warm gesture is this. It also doesn't tend to look scripted. So this is really important to me. See if we all want to do that. This is very important to me. Or this is really important to you. So I'm going to have you. Yeah. Just want to be careful you don't serve pizza. You don't want to do like those things on New Year's. You've seen it all. This is important to you. What I want you all to know, it's just open, it's warm, so important to me, important to you. One hand on the other hand. They're all ways to add in gestures without looking scripted. So I'm going to have you all sit down. Thank you. Good audience. And then for warmth, you want to be open. So this is similar. You want to have open arms. But one thing that tends to happen when we start a presentation, thanks, really happy to be here. We back up, cross our arms. You don't look very happy to be here. So you always want to start a presentation with arms open and an open stance. Again, you're just signaling that warmth. And this is just something we constantly pick up on subconsciously. So someone might think they're not looking to your nonverbals when they make a decision, but they are, research shows. So again, openness when you start. And this applies for Q&A as well. So thanks, and I'm happy to answer any questions. We back up, cross our arms. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. This looks warmer. It looks more confident. And then when someone has a question, moving toward them. Yes, you have the open gesture again, or moving the other way. So we've talked about standing. I want to talk about sitting for a moment. So as women, it's very common that we cross our legs. But what happens now is we become small. So you really want to watch out for this. So one is just to have, again, it's that solid base. You're just sitting up. Oh, you can't see? Sorry? Yeah. You want to go there? Yeah. Oh, I've learned to sit. Sorry? I'll go here. You can see here, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, good. Great. Okay. So as women, we tend to cross, which makes us small, and we collapse in. And I notice this a lot on panels. You'll have men on a panel and then women, and the women always just look smaller. And so you want to open up. So you can sit like this. Just sit more back in your chair and you're up tall. Or you can cross at your ankles. But both of these allow your torso to be up higher, and it allows you to keep gesturing. We started here, we moved to here. You're just more expansive and taking up that space. And then a final point. If you are standing presenting, it's to use movement. So you can take up space with your gestures, but also by walking. So you want to start in the center and then move on transitions. So now that I've talked to you about the problem, let me talk to you about the solution. Now that I've talked to you about the solution, let me talk to you about the benefits of this solution. So whenever you're moving from one section to the next in your presentation, that's an opportunity to walk. It's really helpful for the audience because it allows them to reset in their mind that you're moving on to a new section now. Let's say you said, I have 3 strategies I want to propose to you. This is the first, this is the second strategy, and then that would be the third. Again, just really easy for the audience, and it's just more engaging. So rather than being anchored in one spot, it allows you to move, and it's very fluid. Now that I've talked to you about the solution, let me tell you why it's so important. And then again, you would plant, and you'd have that solid base. And then finally would be eye contact. This is also for warmth. And this is just having a moment of connection with different individuals in the audience. This is great about Bill Clinton, too. Anyone who's seen him speak said, oh, I felt like I was the only person in the room. He's so good with warmth. And what he said, which I love, is someone came up to him after a talk, and he said, you were speaking to an audience of 10,000 people, and you had every one of them in the palm of your hand. How did you do that? And he said, it's because I wasn't speaking to 10,000 people. I was having a one-on-one private conversation with this person, and then a one-on-one private conversation with that person. And so speaking in front of a group, it can provoke anxiety, but again, it's just a series of conversations, one-on-one with this person and that person, and having those moments of eye contact will make your content even more powerful. So now you are well-versed on body language. And so if you have a presentation coming up, even if it's a meeting or a more formal presentation, I recommend recording yourself in advance, turning off the sound, and now that you have all these best practices, keeping them in mind, noticing what you're doing to make your content even more powerful, and what you might be doing to undermine it that you might want to tweak to get there. So now vocals. So Margaret Thatcher was known for her voice. It was said to be one of her most potent political weapons, but her voice did not start out that way. She had a lot of vocal training to become the Iron Lady, to have the voice of the Iron Lady. So we'll quickly take a look at her maiden speech, the first speech that she gave, one of them.
Mrs. Thatcher, it's always supposed to be a tremendous ordeal, maiden speech. Was it for you?
Oh, very much so. I've done a good deal of other speaking, but speaking in the House of Commons is quite different. It's a unique experience.
Later.
To those waiting with bated breath for that favorite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The ladies, not for turning.
So what did you notice? What stood out for you? More power, more gravitas in the second. And so she really worked to have that gravitas, to sound like a strong leader. And so what can you do to hit that sweet spot? So first, warmth and variety. So warmth, we saw with Bill Clinton, you know people that have lost their jobs and lost their homes. It's a warmer voice when you're trying to connect. But also what happens is he was speaking from his diaphragm. So when we get really nervous, our throat tightens and we start speaking from up here. So you're signaling to the audience that you're not strong or confident or assured in your ideas. And so there's a great website. It's called Voice Bunny, and it's 5 tips from voiceover experts. And you can go there, and it will give you exercises you can do to train yourself to speak from your diaphragm. Speaking from your diaphragm will give you warmth because everything is loose here and the sound's coming from here, but also power as well. And then we have variety, and this is the video that we watched. I'm talking about nothing, but I'll make it seem like I am. It's having vocal variety. It's showing excitement and hope, or frustration, or sadness, or being in whatever the emotional tone is of your content. When I work with a speaker, I have them map out what is the emotional tone of each section, and then making sure their voice matches that. And then pace and power. So you thought Margaret Thatcher became more powerful. She had more gravitas. So if you record yourself, listen, do you sound like you have strength and authority? Speaking from your diaphragm will help. And then slowing down makes such a big difference. And pausing. If you were to say, this is the most important thing I want you to take away today. Pause, and then you would say what that is. But it has impact. If you said, our customers are important to us. Our customers matter. The pause just gives so much more weight to what you're saying. So anytime you have something in a presentation or a talk that you want to give weight to, pause right before or right after. And slow down, really take your time with it, have those powerful pauses. A question I get asked a lot is, what do I do about uhs and ums? How many of you experienced that or have seen that? It's so common. So one thing that is very helpful is practice your talk sitting like this. If you have your body in a very relaxed position, it's very hard to speak quickly. It just forces you to be present with each word. And then the ums and uhs don't slip in there. So I had a client who so many ums and uhs. She kept practicing like this. And then as soon as she sat up to give that same presentation, the ums and uhs were virtually gone. So that can make a huge difference. So that is voice, and that finally, so a couple apps that you might find helpful. The first is called Vocal Warm-Up. Certain exercises you can do to warm up your voice before you speak. Like so, this is if you have ums, uhs, likes, can help you remove them. And the last one, Voice Vibes, is great. You can upload your entire presentation, and it will give you feedback on your pace, your pauses, your vocal variety, all the metrics that we talked about. It will say where you fall and how you might want to tweak it. Which brings us to content. So this has to do with pathos and logos. So it's moving an audience emotionally by appealing to emotion and then appealing to logic and reason. And research shows we tend mostly to make emotional gut decisions. And even when we think we're making a logical, rational one, we think we're using the data, we're just using it to post-justify an emotional one we've already made. And so this is where all of this comes together. Your content, you want to have an emotional appeal, but again, your body language as well. People take you in holistically. So what can you do to work on pathos, which tends to be the most important? Know your audience. And so most speakers think, what do I want to say? What is my content? What should I say? But the best speakers think, what does my audience need to hear? I'm sure you all know being audience-centric, customer-centric, and it's the same for speaking. So a great story about this. So Texas in the 1980s had a huge littering problem. Anyone from Texas? Couple of you? Yeah, nice. Had a huge littering problem. They were spending millions of dollars cleaning up litter, trying to convince people not to litter. They said, okay, we're going to come up with a campaign that prevents people from littering. So how many of you know Smokey the Bear? Familiar with him? A lot of you. They came out with Woodsy the Owl. And he said, give a hoot, don't pollute. Like, this is going to be great. People are going to stop littering. What do you think happened? Littering actually went up. People started littering more after Woodsy. So they said, okay, clearly we don't understand our audience. So who is our audience? Turned out to be men between the ages of 18 and 35. And they were men with a lot of kind of Texas state pride, these macho men. So instead they came out with, does anyone know? Don't mess with Texas. So appealing to that bravado. Over the course of 4 years, littering went down 80%, which is completely unheard of in any of these type of interventions. But they got the right message to the right audience. So now all of a sudden, not only are people not littering, they're preventing other people from littering. Don't mess with our state. They're upset when other people are littering now. So again, that right message matters, and it's based on your audience and what they care about. So I'll give you an example. I have a regular meditation practice that's had a huge impact on my life. So let's say I was trying to persuade you, you should also consider a daily meditation practice. So I would first think about, what are the promoting forces? What do you care about most? What motivates you? So for example, let's say I know you have a really intense workload, so much to do. I might talk about the productivity that it creates. You'll be so much more productive because of it. If you're just really stressed and snapping at colleagues or just feeling overwhelmed, I might talk about how it produces a sense of calm. If you're a speaker and you want to connect more with your audience, how it can help you be more grounded and present and help you connect. But it's important that I know you in particular and what you care about, which is what Clinton did. He understood where that question was coming from. She knows people, and that's why she cares. But you can have all the promoting factors in the world. You're like, I get this person, I know what they care about, I know what motivates them. But you also need to think about the restraining forces. So what biases or hesitations might they have? So you might say, yeah, great, I'd love to be more focused and productive and calm, but I just don't have the time. I have 5 kids, and I have this crazy job, and there's just so much going on, I can't do it. So that I would know that I need to say, well, you know, research shows that even 10 minutes a day, even 5 can make a difference. You can do this when you're walking to lunch or in the shower. So I'm anticipating that in advance and infusing any areas of resistance. Maybe it's, I don't know how, and I know that you don't know how. So I said there's these great apps, here's some you might want to try, and that can make a difference. And then also the level of knowledge they have. If I'm presenting to neuroscientists, I might have very different content than to a lay audience. And so whenever I work with clients, the very first question I ask is, who is your audience? What motivates them? What inspires them? And then what areas of resistance might they have? What biases or hesitations? And then all the content is informed by that. So you might have the exact same stories, but you'll just frame them differently. You'll highlight different points in different research based on that audience. There's a great article, too. It's in Harvard Business Review called Change the Way You Persuade. And it talks about there's different decision-making types, and we usually fall into one of these categories. And so if you're trying to persuade someone and you know what their type is, you can appeal to them more effectively. So also a great article. So know your audience, what they care about, what might get in the way. And then finally, storytelling. So Chip Heath is a colleague of mine at Stanford Business School. He wrote a great book, Made to Stick, which I would recommend. But he looked at all the best urban legends, marketing campaigns, best speeches in history, and he looked at what makes those ideas stick. Do any of you remember the Where's the Beef commercial from the 80s? Yeah, a lot of head nods from the 80s. That was so long ago, and we still remember it. So he looked at what makes them stick, what are the qualities, and he came up with 6. And I'll share the number 1 in a minute, but he also looked at speeches and presentations. And he found the number 1 mistake is the message is too abstract. So speakers offer concepts and conclusions, but it's stories and examples that bring them to life. You're not nearly as effective if you're just making points and talking in an abstract, high-level way. You really have to ground it with a concrete, either personal story, story of someone else, story of a company. So we'll look at an example. Steve Jobs was a master at this. So in this video, his message is ask for help. So that might be your advice. You should ask for help. It really makes a difference. It sets you apart. But that's not meaningful. You're not likely to remember that. It might not persuade you to ask for help. So he tells a story.
I've actually always found something to be very true, which is most people don't get those experiences because they never ask. I've never found anybody that didn't want to help me if I asked them for help. I always call them up. I called up, this will date me, but I called up Bill Hewlett when I was 12 years old, and he lived in Palo Alto. His number was still in the phone book. And he answered the phone himself. He said, yes? He said, hi, I'm Steve Jobs. I'm 12 years old. I'm a student in high school, and I want to build a frequency counter. And I was wondering if you had any spare parts I could have. And he laughed, and he gave me the spare parts to build this frequency counter, and he gave me a job that summer in Hewlett-Packard, working on the assembly line, putting nuts and bolts together on frequency counters. He got me a job in the place that built them. And I was in heaven. And I've never found anyone who said no or hung up the phone when I called. I just asked. And when people ask me, I try to be as responsive, to pay that debt of gratitude back. Most people never pick up the phone and call. Most people never ask. And that's what separates sometimes the people that do things from the people that just dream about them.
So good, for so many reasons. But he told the story, so it's much more likely if I asked you weeks later, months later, what was his advice, ask for help, and you'd remember the story of him calling up Bill Hewlett in the phone book when he was 12 years old. So Chip Heath's advice, if you do one thing in all of his research, one thing, it's tell stories. Research backs this up. So in terms of memorability, it makes your idea 22 times more memorable. This is based on looking at recall weeks later and months later. It creates more favorable impressions of you as a speaker. We like Steve Jobs more now, having heard that story. And it also creates greater impact. And so they did a study with Save the Children. So they said this many children are suffering, and this is the impact. And then they told the story of a specific child, a specific concrete story, and they doubled the amount of donations. So again, stories create impact. And they also make us more likely to embrace the message itself. And so again, you're more likely now, probably, to ask for help having heard that story. You're probably more likely to remember that you should know your audience and to do it based on the Don't Mess with Texas story. So whenever I give a point, I try to give a concrete story or example to back it up. So I lead many workshops just on storytelling alone. This could be a 2-hour workshop on your story arc, and including vivid details. But for the purposes of today, I'll just say it's great when you're outlining a presentation, you'll have your structure. So let's say problem, solution, benefit is a common structure. So you want to have your headline. This is the problem. Then you want to have a concrete example to bring it to life. How can we see this problem in practice? Just last week, I was talking to a customer, or here's what happened. You politicians do this a lot. Just last week, I was in Iowa, and I was talking to Joey, and here's what happened. So think of what is your headline, and then how can you bring it to life? Ask for help. He has his ask for help story. Again, personal story, customer story. But then always remembering the relevance. This is something that's often left out. Even if you're telling a story, you need to hit home. What is the point? Why is this so important? So you notice Steve Jobs ended with, it's what sets apart people who achieve things from those who only dream about them. So here's the problem, you bring it to life, and then here's why it matters. Here's what's happening because of this problem. Here's the solution. Then you let us see it in practice in a very concrete way. And part of the reason for this is now the audience is in an immersive experience. They're picturing something in their mind. So ask yourself, can the audience see in their mind? Are they picturing what's happening? And then hit home why it matters and the relevance. So now we will bring all of this together. We talked about your body language, your voice, your content. I'm going to show a quick clip of Oprah, who is amazing at all these things. And I love, in particular, her message in this clip, given the conference today.
Always the only woman in the room. Still walk in, only woman in the room. And there's a room full of white men, usually older. Thrills me. Just thrills me. I just love it. Usually the only black person in the room. Also, never really concerned me because I don't look at people through color. I didn't get to be where I am and who I am by looking at the color of people's skin. I really, literally took Martin Luther King at his word and understand that the content of a person's character and refuse to let anybody else do that to me. So I love it, just love it. And there's a wonderful phrase by Maya Angelou from a poem that she wrote called To Our Grandmothers, that she says, when I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. So when I walk into a room, and particularly before I have something really challenging to do, or I'm going to be in a circumstance where I feel I'm going to be, up against some difficulties, I will literally sit and I will call on that 10,000. I will call on the ancestors. I will call on those people who've come before me. I will call on the women who forged a path that I might be able to sit in the room with all of those white men and love it so much. I call on that because I know that my being where I am, and first of all, being who I am and where I am, didn't come just out of myself, that I come from a heritage. And so I own that, and I step into that room, not just as myself, but I bring all of that energy with me.
So what stood out for you? What do you think she did well?
She made herself bigger.
Bigger, yeah, and interesting, she did cross her legs, but she still allowed herself to be up tall. It's very Oprah. So again, it's just having that upward stance, yeah. So her with her posture, a lot of gravitas. What else? Emphatic. I love it. Just love it. Yeah. So a lot of vocal variety. She slowed down at certain times. She paused. So again, a lot of gravitas with her voice, but it's warm and she just sounds so authentic. It's really powerful, and it's a meaningful message and content. So we've talked about there's a communication sweet spot, the warmth and competence, how you can have more engaging delivery and then more impactful content. I'm happy to answer any questions for anyone that would like to email me, and then we have a couple minutes right now if you have any questions as well.